A profound shift is underway across Europe. Once defined by its commitment to peace and stability, the continent now finds itself at a crossroads, grappling with the urgent need to rethink its approach to security and defense. The mood in capitals from Berlin to Warsaw is changing, as leaders and citizens alike confront a new, more uncertain era. For decades, military spending was slashed, armies shrank, and the idea of war on European soil seemed unthinkable. The fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War ushered in an era of optimism. European nations reaped the so-called peace dividend, redirecting resources from defense to social programs, infrastructure, and economic growth. Military bases were closed, and the specter of conflict faded from public consciousness. But Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 shattered that illusion. The images of tanks rolling across borders and millions of refugees fleeing westward jolted Europe awake. Suddenly, the threat of war was no longer a distant memory or a problem for other continents. It was a stark, present reality. Suddenly, the reality of war is back at Europe's doorstep, forcing a continent-wide reckoning. Emergency summits were convened and NATO's eastern flank was reinforced. The sense of security that had defined European life for a generation was replaced by anxiety and a renewed sense of vulnerability. The peace dividend has expired. Security is now an urgent, existential concern. European governments are scrambling to adapt, recognizing that the old assumptions no longer hold. The need to protect borders, infrastructure, and democratic values has become paramount. Public opinion has swung decisively in favor of stronger defenses. Where once there was skepticism about military spending, now there is broad support for rebuilding armed forces and investing in new technologies. Citizens understand that freedom and prosperity cannot be taken for granted. The debate is no longer about whether to spend more on defense, but how much, how fast, and on what. Parliaments and cabinets are locked in urgent discussions, weighing the need for tanks, drones, cyber capabilities, and missile defense. The scale and speed of this transformation are unprecedented in recent European history. Leaders now have the political space to make tough choices and invest heavily in their armed forces. Defense budgets are rising and procurement deals are being signed at a record pace. New alliances are being forged, and old ones are being strengthened as Europe seeks to present a united front. Europe is awakening from a long dream of perpetual peace, facing the harsh realities of a more dangerous world. The sense of safety that once allowed for complacency has been replaced by vigilance and determination. The lesson is clear: freedom and security have a price. The sacrifices of past generations are being remembered, and a new generation is preparing to defend the values that define Europe. The continent must actively defend its peace. This means not only investing in weapons and soldiers, but also in resilience, intelligence, and cooperation. Europe's security is now seen as a shared responsibility, requiring unity and resolve. This is not a fleeting reaction, but a structural change in how Europeans see their place in the world. The events of recent years have fundamentally altered the public's expectations and the political landscape. Security is now at the heart of the European project. The new consensus is reshaping Europe's security architecture. As alliances deepen and strategies evolve, Europe is forging a new path, one that acknowledges the dangers of the present while striving to protect the peace and freedoms that have defined the continent for decades. Recent polls reveal a remarkable shift in public opinion. Across Europe, there is now overwhelming support for increased military spending. This is not just a marginal trend or a fleeting reaction. It's a deep and sustained movement, visible in nearly every country. People from all walks of life, young and old, urban and rural, are voicing their concerns about security and demanding that their governments do more to protect them. The numbers are striking, and they reflect a continent-wide awakening to new realities. In Poland, for example, a staggering 89% of citizens now back higher defense budgets, making it one of the most supportive nations in Europe. In Denmark, the figure is almost as high, with 87% of the population in favor. These are not isolated cases, but part of a broader pattern that is sweeping across the continent. Even in the United Kingdom, where debates over military spending have often been contentious, 66% of people now agree that more investment in defense is necessary. This marks a significant change from previous years, when public opinion was far more divided. What's truly remarkable is that this surge in support is no longer confined to any single political party or ideology. It's become a mainstream consensus, cutting across traditional political lines and national borders. From left to right, from north to south, leaders are responding to a unified call from their citizens. the war in Ukraine has been a turning point. The threat of conflict is no longer abstract or distant, it's become tangible and immediate. The images of destruction and resilience coming out of Ukraine have ended long-standing debates about the relevance of military power in the modern world. Scenes of Ukrainian resistance and the daily struggles of civilians have struck a deep chord with Europeans everywhere. These powerful images have made it clear that peace and security cannot be taken for granted, and that freedom sometimes requires sacrifice and vigilance. With such strong public backing, European leaders now have the political capital they need to make tough and sometimes unpopular decisions. They are empowered to push through reforms, increase budgets, and strengthen alliances, knowing that their citizens are behind them. Security has become the top priority for many governments, even if it means raising taxes or making difficult cuts to other programs. The public understands that these sacrifices are necessary to ensure a safer future for all. The current climate of fear and uncertainty has fundamentally changed the political calculus. Issues that once seemed secondary or controversial are now at the forefront of national debates, shaping policy decisions at the highest levels. This groundswell of public support is the driving force behind Europe's new defense surge. It's not just politicians or military leaders calling for change, it's ordinary people, rallying together for a common cause. With legitimacy and urgency on their side, European governments now have a unique opportunity to turn policy into real military strength. The challenge ahead is great, but the will of the people is clear, and that may prove to be Europe's greatest asset. Russia's aggression is the main driver of Europe's security rethink. The invasion of Ukraine was a direct assault on the European security order. Russia is spending 7.5% of its GDP on defense, mobilizing its economy for war. This dwarfs most European efforts, exposing a dangerous capability gap. Moscow's threats, including nuclear rhetoric, are designed to intimidate and divide. Europe's underfunded, undersized armies are now scrambling to catch up. The war in Ukraine has forced a painful but necessary re-evaluation of Europe's defense posture. Anxiety is highest in countries bordering Russia or with a Soviet past. The Baltic states and Poland are ramping up defense budgets, conscription, and fortifications. Poland aims to spend over 4% of GDP on defense, building one of Europe's strongest armies. Finland and Sweden have joined NATO, ending decades of neutrality. The Nordic region is becoming a heavily defended NATO bastion. Even Germany, long reluctant, has launched a €100 billion fund to modernize its military. Berlin now pledges to meet NATO's 2% spending target permanently. Western Europe is also waking up, recognizing it can no longer outsource security. Europe's largest economies are assuming greater responsibility for collective defense. The continent is mobilizing for a new era of strategic realism. Uncertainty in the US, especially the prospect of Trump's return, has jolted Europe. The continent has watched closely as American politics grow more unpredictable, realizing that the security guarantees it once took for granted may no longer be as solid as before. This sense of instability has sent shockwaves through European capitals, prompting urgent discussions about the future of the transatlantic relationship. Trump's criticism of NATO and repeated threats to withdraw US support forced Europe to confront its dependence on American military power. For decades, Europe relied on the US as the backbone of its defense, but Trump's rhetoric made it clear that this arrangement could change overnight. The possibility of a sudden shift in US policy has made European leaders realize that they cannot afford to be complacent. Now, strategic autonomy is a serious topic. Europe must be ready to defend itself. This means investing more in its own armed forces, developing independent capabilities, and ensuring that European countries can act together if needed. The idea of a Europe that can stand on its own 2 feet is no longer just a theoretical debate, it's become a practical necessity. The EU is pushing for joint procurement, a stronger defense industry, and more military cooperation. New initiatives are being launched to streamline defense spending, encourage innovation, and reduce duplication among member states. By working together, European countries hope to build a more efficient and effective defense system that can respond to modern threats. The goal: a stronger European pillar within NATO, less reliant on US politics. By taking on more responsibility, Europe aims to ensure that NATO remains a credible and balanced alliance, even if American priorities shift. This approach is about strengthening the partnership, not replacing it, and making sure Europe can contribute more to its own security. Some worry this could undermine NATO, but most see a more capable Europe as a benefit. A Europe that invests in its own defense is better prepared to share the burden and respond to crises. While there are debates about the best path forward, there is growing consensus that Europe must step up, both for its own sake and for the health of the alliance. The Trump factor has been a harsh but effective catalyst for self-reliance. His unpredictable approach to alliances has forced Europe to rethink old assumptions and take concrete steps toward greater independence. In many ways, this wake-up call has accelerated changes that were already overdue. Europe is building the foundations of a more robust security posture. Investments in infrastructure, technology, and joint training exercises are laying the groundwork for a future where Europe can act decisively, both within NATO and on its own if necessary. The transatlantic alliance is evolving, with Europe taking on more responsibility. As European nations step up, the balance within NATO is shifting, creating a partnership that is more resilient and better prepared for the challenges ahead. This new era of cooperation could ultimately make both Europe and the alliance stronger than ever before. The question of nuclear deterrence is back on the table. With doubts about the US nuclear umbrella, some Europeans are considering a continental deterrent. France's arsenal is central to this debate, with talk of extending its protection to EU partners. But sharing control over nuclear weapons is politically and technically fraught. Deep anti-nuclear sentiment and sovereignty concerns make agreement difficult. Still, the fact this debate is happening shows the depth of Europe's security anxiety. All options are being considered to guarantee survival in a more dangerous world. Rebuilding Europe's military strength is expensive and comes at a tough economic moment. Meeting NATO's 2% target means tens of billions more each year, straining national budgets. Governments face competing demands: healthcare, climate action, social welfare. Every euro for defense is one less for other priorities, forcing painful trade-offs. Tax hikes, spending cuts, or more debt, all are politically risky. Proposals for common EU defense bonds face resistance from fiscally conservative states. The challenge is not just finding money, but spending it wisely for real military effectiveness. The economic burden will test governments' resolve and citizens' patience. Europe can no longer avoid the high cost of security. More spending alone won't build a credible defense. Europe must work together. The continent's defense is fragmented, with armies using incompatible equipment. Joint procurement and standardization are needed for efficiency and interoperability. National pride and protectionism often block cooperation despite the strategic logic. Political and strategic unity is even harder. Countries have different threat perceptions and priorities. Forging a unified command structure would require ceding sovereignty. Many resist. Leadership and decision-making remain contentious, especially between large and small states. NATO's integrated command is a model, but a parallel European structure is a huge challenge. Building Fortress Europe requires trust and unity still under construction. The foundation for collective security must be stronger than ever. Europe has begun a historic journey to rebuild its defenses. Russian aggression and doubts about US support have forged a new consensus for military strength. Budgets are rising and tough conversations about nuclear deterrence and autonomy are underway. But the hardest part is sustaining this resolve over time. If the Ukraine war drags on or recedes from headlines, public support could fade. Economic pressures may test citizens' willingness to accept trade-offs. Unity will be challenged by differing national interests and future crises. Success depends on leaders prioritizing collective security over politics. Europe faces a fundamental choice: invest in strategic autonomy or risk renewed vulnerability. The decisions made now will shape Europe's security and destiny for generations.